All right, welcome to our next video for social psychology. We're going to look at antisocial and prosocial behaviors. So first, let's focus on antisocial. Again, remember, antisocial does not mean, oh, I'm the loner in the corner. I don't want to deal with people. It is against society, linked to criminal behavior, that type of stuff. So first, let's look at some basic definitions, more vocab. Prejudice, simply called prejudgment. A prejudice is an unjustifiable, usually it's negative, attitude towards a group and its members, often of a different cultural, ethnic, or gender groups. Things that make up your prejudice, so components of it, are your beliefs, so your stereotypes about a group. Emotions, so hostility, envy, fear, that tends to go in there with prejudice. And your predispositions to and how you act. So that's where discrimination comes in. All right, prejudice works at a conscious level, but more so at an unconscious level. So prejudice is more kind of like a knee-jerk response than an actual conscious decision. Um, in the opinion of most psychologists and sociologists, anyway. And actually, there's probably a test. I need to find it. I'll put it on Edmodo when I do. But there's a test that you can take. You have to like click things really quickly about different pictures and things like that, and it's supposed to determine how prejudiced you are towards like different genders, different races, religions, political stuff. So it's really neat, and it's all like using that psychoanalytic kind of stuff um, to be able to determine that. So again, take it with a grain of salt, but it is interesting, and it does show that you may not think you're prejudiced towards a certain group or person or whatever, but it does start to show through on an unconscious level. So what causes prejudice? Why does prejudice arise? Well, first of all, social inequalities, haves versus have-nots, right? It's kind of a jealousy thing. Two, social divisions and identities, right? They're different, and someone's different than you, and that's just we don't like that. Um, it makes us feel uneasy. Three, emotional scapegoating. You need someone to blame for something. Four, thought patterns and cognition. So it's just your way of thinking. Social identities. So you have your in and out groups. So your in group, if I ever refer to that, what I mean is it's people from whom you share a common identity. It's the us. All right. The out group is those that you perceive as being different from those in your in group. So it's the them. So us is the in group, them is the out group. And then you can have an in group bias, which is the tendency to favor your own group. Right. Frustration aggression principle. It's a principle in which frustration caused by blocking to achieve some goal creates anger, which can then generate aggression. So in other words, people won't be aggressive unless they are frustrated. Most research has actually shown that this is a bit too simplistic and general of a theory, but they do agree that the direct, let me move this out of the way for you, that the direct cause of most kinds of aggression is negative affect. Remember, affect is emotion. All right. So you have with aggression, you have this excitation transfer. All right. So it's an arousal from one experience that may carry over into an independent situation. So the key is the independent situation has to trigger the aggression. So your system's already amped up and ready to go, but something else triggers it. So say you just got back from a 3-mile jog, and your brother insults you. You're more likely to respond aggressively to your brother insulting you because you were already in a heightened state. All right, does that make sense? Hopefully, so moving on. There we go. This can have then you have aversive events. So studies in which animals and humans experience unpleasant events reveal that those made miserable often make others miserable. All right, so if someone is miserable and they're feeling aggressive and nasty, odds are they're going to do that to other people as well. Animals do it too. Cats do it all the time. Stressful environments, so high temperatures, air pollution, noise, all have been found to increase aggressive tendencies. All right, and if you look at this, all right, murders and rapes per day in Houston, Texas, as the temperature goes up, so does people's aggressions. All right, this is fact. You can Google different studies on this and see that crime rates and everything like that, all that stuff actually goes down in colder months as well, or in areas where there's not as much air pollution or not as much noise. So all these things are frustrating. Think about it. When you're sitting in the classroom and it's really hot, high temperatures, you're a little agitated. All right. When it's noisy, you can't concentrate. You get a little agitated. All right. Social identities, Jane Elliott's blue-eyed versus brown-eyed experiment. We're going to do something in class like this. And if there's time, we'll watch the documentary. We'll probably wind up watching it after the AP exam. Um, but you'll really enjoy this. This is where you had a third grade teacher. She wanted to show her students about discrimination and prejudice in response to the Martin Luther King Jr. Assassination. Right, so it was like right after it happened. Um, so she separated her classes by eye color, giving one group privileges and special treatment and treating the other group with contempt. All right. And you'll see that. We are going to look at that more in depth, so you'll see what happened. You have your scapegoat theory, all right, which its prejudice provides an outlet for anger, which is the emotion, by providing someone to blame. So, for example, after 9/11, many people lashed out against innocent Arab Americans because they needed a scapegoat. They needed somebody to blame, all right, for it. So they lashed out, right? Just like in Nazi Germany, right? The Jews were the scapegoat there. Somebody to blame for a tragic event. Cognitive roots to prejudices. So one way we simplify our world is to categorize. All right, we categorize people into different groups by stereotyping them. All right, so we have a different stereotyped image for someone who's Asian, for someone who's white, for someone who's black, for someone who's Hispanic, things like that. We group people. Right, that's just what we do, and we do that on stereotypes. Um, and it can get dangerous because it's not always correct. Cognitive roots of prejudice: the tendency of people to believe the world is just and people get what they deserve and deserve what they get. So this is called the just world phenomenon. Right, so keep this in mind. Right, so it's kind of it's karma basically. How do we reduce prejudice? Well, we have there's this contact hypothesis, which says stereotypes and prejudice towards a group will diminish as contact with a group increases. So if uh, you are you have a stereotype or a prejudice against Hispanic people or Black people or gay people or whatever, insert group here. All right. The more you interact with people from that group, the less that the stereotype and prejudice is going to be there anymore. It's like it's going to wear off, right? You're not going to have it anymore because now you're around them more, all right? But is contact enough? Most research has shown that it's not enough to just have contact alone. It's a part of the solution, but also you need educational techniques to address the social and cognitive perceptions of it. All right. Aggression itself. We've been talking about aggression, so what is it? It can be any physical or verbal behavior intended to hurt or destroy, whether done reactively out of hostility or proactively out of calculated means to an end. So whether it's deliberate or not. Research shows that aggressive behavior emerges from the interaction of biology and experience. So the biological influences, um, genetic influences. Animals have been bred for aggressiveness, for sports, and for, at times, for research. Twin studies show aggression may be genetic. In men, aggression is possibly linked to the Y chromosome. Then you have neural influences, so in your brain. Some centers of the brain, especially in your limbic system, the amygdala, right, that controls emotion, and the frontal lobe, right, that kind of regulates the emotion, are immediately involved with aggression. Right. Then you have biochemical influences. Animals with diminished amounts of testosterone or that have been castrated, so your cats and dogs have been neutered, become more docile. All right, so they become a lot more tame after they've been neutered. And if injected with testosterone, aggression is going to increase. So if you have a dog or a cat that's like kind of nasty and they've been neutered, imagine how aggressive they would be if they hadn't been neutered. Um, Prenatal exposure to testosterone also increases aggression in females. Right? So if females have been exposed to testosterone um, in the womb somehow, then they're more likely to be aggressive as well. Learning and cultural mechanisms. When aggression leads to desired outcomes, one learns to be aggressive because it was reinforced, right? This is seen more in individualist cultures than collectivist cultures. Remember, individualist cultures is like Western society where it's all about self-promotion and you and doing well and success, whereas collectivist cultures is more about um, the family and honor. Cultures that favor violence breed more violence. Scottish and Irish settlers in the South had more violent tendencies than the Quakers and Dutch in the northeast of the United States. And you kind of see some of that still carrying out today. So, when are people aggressive? Okay, I already answered that. This slide has somehow gotten out of order. All right, pro-social relations. All right, so we're switching gears. All right, there's something called altruism. So we talked about the negative, let's talk about the positive. All right, altruism is unselfish regard for the welfare of others. All right, so when or where have you seen altruistic behaviors in the past in years in America? All right, so if you look at these two pictures, all right, you've got during Hurricane Katrina, New Orleans, and 9/11. How did people show altruism? Right? You had firefighters or just people in general or National Guard or again, people in general just going back to help others just for the sake of helping without even thinking about what's going to happen to them. That's altruism. Why do we help and what influences our decision? Well, there's this social exchange theory that says people help in order to reduce the unpleasant arousal, so unpleasant feelings, caused by another person's distress. When somebody else is distressed, it stresses us out. All right. Yet at the same time, they attempt to minimize the cost of doing this deed. So, for example, what will helping cost me versus what will help give the other person? If benefit outweighs the cost, you're going to help. If cost outweighs the benefit, you're not. Reciprocity norm, sorry, it's in yellow, you can't really see it. Reciprocity norm is the expectation that we should return help, uh, not harm to those who have helped us, right? Um, so like do unto others. Social reciprocity norm, get this out of the way, is largely learned, and it's a norm that tells us to help others when they need us, even though they may not repay us in any kind. So influencing factors in the, the social exchange theory. One, clarity for need of help. If a person is in dire need, we will help most of the time. All right, we're going to look at this case in class. All right, I'll look at it a little bit now with you. Um, so on March 13th, 1964, Catherine, aka Kitty, uh, Genovese, was returning to her apartment in a quiet, mostly residential area of Queens from her job as a bar manager at 3:15 a.m. She walked the 20 feet from the parking lot to her door. A man, Winston Mosley, attacked her, stabbing her. Kitty cried out, "Oh my God, he's stabbing me. Please stop. Please help me." Numerous neighbors later reported hearing the attack, many coming to look out their windows. One neighbor called out of his window, "Let the girl alone." At this call, Mosley left Kitty, lying on the pavement. The apartment complex became still. Kitty struggled to her feet, bleeding badly from several stab wounds, and made it to her side of the apartment complex to a locked door, grabbing the wall for support. Approximately 5 minutes after the first attack, Mosley returned and began stabbing Kitty again. She cried out, "I'm dying, I'm dying." Again, other people in the complex heard her, lights came on, windows open, and people watched the scene from their apartment. Mosley fled and a second time, as the witness said into a white Chevy and appeared to drive away. At 3:25 a.m., Kitty, bleeding profusely from her wounds, stumbled to the rear of her building and tried to enter through the back door. The door was locked. She slid along the wall until she reached a hallway leading to the second floor, falling on the floor at the entrance to the hall. Mosley returned a third time, following the trail of blood to where she lay bleeding on the floor. While she was there, semi unconscious and incoherent, he sexually assaulted her and stabbed her the final 17th time, killing Kitty and fleeing the scene. The entire event lasted at least 32 minutes. About 3:50 a.m., a neighbor of Kitty called the police. Before doing so, he called a friend and asked what he should do. When the police began investigating, they discovered 38 people who had heard or observed some part of the fatal assault. So on March 27th, the New York Times published the now famous, they said 37, but they found out that there was 38 people who saw the murder and didn't call the police, which is an article by Martin Gainsbourg. Uh, it drew national attention to the crime in the story. So what happened? All right. So one, the presence of others. All right. There was a diffusion of responsibility here. That's where if more people are present, the responsibility for helping is spread out amongst all of you. All right. So it's like, well, all of us see this. One of them will do something. All right. Which leads to the bystander effect. As the number of people present increases, the likelihood that one person will help decreases. All right. So it's like diffusion responsibility is what you're thinking. All right. Bystander effect is what happens. All right. Most experts agree that Kitty Genevieve's case, right, the witnesses all felt someone else would step in and help. 38 of them, but no one did. Right. So they were all diffusing responsibility, and what happened was the bystander effect. The personality of the helper can also influence this, especially the mood of a person. This goes back to that when we learned about the feel good, do good phenomenon. If you feel good, you'll do good things. There you go. Other environmental factors, so being from in a small town or rural area, not being in a rush or a hurry if it's nice weather, having just observed someone else being helpful, like that pay it forward concept, or having just done something helpful for somebody who just did something nice for you, you're more likely to help. Um, Other helping theories, empathy altruism theory, which says people help for completely altruistic reasons and are usually motivated by a desire to increase another person's well-being. This depends on how much empathy you have for someone. So do you really feel for them? Have you been in their shoes before? Do you really know what's going on in their life? So that's what's making you feel this altruism. It's because you know. And then you have your evolutionary theory, which is where people help relatives because it increases their chance that the helper's gene is going to survive in the future. So you help them to survive because you want their genes to go on. Right? So that's the evolutionary theory. Conflict, right? Conflict. It's a perceived incompatibility of actions, goals, or idea. It can cause a destructive cycle. Social traps. All right, social traps are situations where we pursue our personal interests at the costs of our collective well-being. So it's like a short-term solution that kind of leads to a long-term problem. Distorted perceptions. You have your mirror image perceptions. As we see our enemy as untrustworthy and evil intention, so they see us that way. And self-fulfilling prophecy, we've talked about this before. We can behave towards others in ways that influence them to behave in ways that justify our beliefs about them. So I talked about this before. My math teacher thought I was like straight up thug life and stole her markers all the time, was this horrible person. She thought it so much that I reached a point I was like, well, forget it. Fine. I'll be the person she thinks I am and I'll steal her markers. Right? So that was a self-fulfilling prophecy. Psychology of attraction. Let's start talking about love and really switch gears. So environment, proximity. So it's your geographic nearness is a powerful predictor of friendship. So like physically, like geography, the closer you are to someone, the more like friends you are. Um, Mere exposure effect. Repeated exposure to novel, like new stimuli increases one's liking of the item. For example, I initially hated Lady Gaga's Born This Way song, but the more I was exposed to the song, the more I couldn't get out of my head and I started to like it. Uh, in other words, the more you're around someone new, the more you grow to like them. Uh, the actual circumstances under which people first meet also influence attraction. One is more likely to be attracted to a stranger you meet in a comfortable rather than uncomfortable physical condition. Um, Attraction is more likely if you associate someone with something pleasant. Similarity, having similar views between individuals cause a bond of attraction to strengthen. But it doesn't mean that you have the exactly the same things, but similar. All right, the big ways, um, things that you have similar. So like the big things: religious views, political views, family values. Those are kind of the same. Physical attractiveness. In physical attraction, uh, it's actually really important. Most experts say yes, especially important in the initial stages of a relationship. It is often what draws you to someone to begin with. So it sounds really shallow, but physical attractiveness does matter to an extent because it's what brings someone towards you to begin with. So this is the matching hypothesis states that people tend to date, marry, or form other committed relationships with those who are similar in physical attractiveness as well, not just with like having things in common. Psychologists believe that it may really be more about compromise uh, than than anything. Intimate relationships, passionate love, which is an aroused state of intense positive absorption in another, usually present at the beginning of a love relationship. We're actually going to go more in depth than what this PowerPoint goes into about love and dating and relationships and mating in class. Usually occurs at the beginning of a relationship when you are almost consumed with the thoughts of that person. That's when you have passionate love the most. And again, we'll talk about that more in depth. Compassionate love, where you have deep, affectionate, intimate attachment, remarked by mutual connection for the welfare of the other person. Less arousing, but psychologically more intimate and passionate love. Includes items like equity when one receives what he or she gives in the relationship. So there's give and take, 50-50. Self-disclosure, reveal intimate details about yourself. Compassionate love is what is left when passion changes or goes away. So when the passionate love stage is over, all right, like the new relationship puppy love, compassionate love is what's left behind. Uh, and then there's Sternberg's triangular theory of love. Copy this down because this is really what we're going to go in depth with in class. Intimacy, that's your liking. So you have intimacy alone. Compassionate love is where you have intimacy and commitment. Um, then you have your empty love, which is where you only have commitment. Fatuous love, where you have passion and commitment. Passion, which is where you're infatuated with someone, so you have passion alone. Romantic love, where you have intimacy and passion. And then finally, what's in the middle, uh, consummate love, which is where you have intimacy, passion, and commitment. All three things in one. All right, so there we go. That is the end of this unit and the end of all of content for AP Psych. See you in class. Bye-bye. Oh, don't forget to take your Edmodo quiz. Um, it's the Chapter 14 quiz 2. Please make sure you take that before class. All right, thank you.